Hey, it's Larkin Rose, and right now, about 10 a.m. November 16th, 2011, a particular liar in Crook named Kerry is waiting for me at the downtown Federal Building in Philadelphia to have a meeting to huff and puff and try to threaten to do nasty things and come up with any way to, she hopes, intimidate me into handing over lots of money that I don't owe her, or the IRS, and that I don't actually have anyway. And it occurred to me, first of all, it'd be totally pointless to go to the meeting. All it is, huff and puff and mafia extortion. It occurred to me it'd be a lot more useful to make this video and post it on YouTube. Now, my own current case with the IRS, sort of, who cares? But it gives a good insight into what the United States government, and particularly the IRS, really is. And the fact that if you think we have law and we have due process and we have all these checks and balances and we have a constitutional republic, yada, 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 if that's actually the reality you think you live in, this little example, which is one of millions out there, this little example demonstrates that the entire legal system is a lie. That the government works by might makes right, and in the end they will do anything. Their rules don't matter, their laws don't matter, the truth doesn't matter, morality doesn't matter, they're thieves. What it comes right down to is they're thieves. Now most of the time they put up a show as if it's law enforcement and as if there are these rules and regulations that everybody abide by, but if you annoy them enough, you find out those rules don't really apply to them. They don't restrict them. They don't abide by anything except love of dominion. Oh, I should quick add, she says her name is Kerry Martin, the IRS thief who's trying to rob me of lots of money. That may or may not be her name. Like a lot of cowardly thugs, IRS employees often use fake names because they don't want people to know who they are. So let me give I can't possibly go through the entire history of what led up to this, but hopefully I will have an ebook of my book Kicking the Dragon released pretty soon that tells my whole ridiculous story of dealing with the IRS over years and years and years. That's not actually particularly relevant to what I want to talk about today, except you sort of need to know why they really, really don't like me. And they really want to do anything they can to destroy me, even if they have to just completely make things up and then act like the mafia. Which is what Kerry Martin is doing. So, without giving all the details, because literally I could make 500 YouTube videos and still not give you all the details of my own case, I found that the IRS's own laws don't say, that the income tax laws don't say what people are taught they say. And so I brought it up, and they said, we don't know why, but you better file and pay. And I didn't, and they prosecuted me, and they got 12 boneheads to say guilty for misdemeanor willful failure to file, and I got to spend a year in a cage. Now, all the details of all the ridiculous things they did at my trial, having to lie, cheat, and steal, that's another story. Like I said, it would take up hundreds of YouTube videos to go through all that. But since then, basically, I was convicted, and then there's the time in which sentencing happens, and there's a whole bunch of preparation on both sides. Basically, the government did what it always does, which is it uses sentencing as a way to do things it's not actually supposed to do. For example, the judge basically made it clear that if I didn't file returns and pretended I owed the IRS lots of money and give him lots of money, he'd stick me in for several more years instead of just one, which is extortion. It's also a forced confession. He basically said, you're going to file these returns and sign them and say you owe the money, or you get to spend a few more years in a cage. So I decided, well, my family's been through enough, I'm going to do the forced confession routine and give them a bunch of money that I know I don't owe them because they're thugs and they have the ability to hurt me even more if I don't. So before going to federal prison for a year, which was 2006, I filed a bunch of returns, pretended I owed the IRS money, and gave them a bunch of money. Now, they wanted to audit those returns, and they did. And after years and years and years, they closed the audit and said, okay, yeah, we're accepting them as originally filed. However, out of the blue, ages later, I get a letter, I forget which the first one even was, that basically says, you owe us $1 zillion. And didn't specify why, and didn't specify who made the claim or what it was based on. And then they said, well, here, it's a penalty. And I had to look up the penalty and see what it is. Penalty for not filing my employer tax returns. Form 941, I think it is. And I wrote back to them and said, I don't know where you get your information, but I've never been an employer, which is why I didn't file my employer returns, because I haven't been one, ever. They ignored that, and they sent more letters, and huff and puff, and now you owe us this many thousand and that many thousand, and this penalty and that penalty for not filing, and blah, 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 not collecting from your employees. And I wrote back. Over and over and over, I wrote back, I don't have employees. I've never had employees. I've never been an employer. We had a medical transcription business years ago, and we had typists who worked for us. They would work at their own homes, on their own equipment, their own hours. So they were subcontractors. They weren't our employees. And nobody had ever challenged that before. Nobody had ever brought it up. But eventually it became clear that somebody had just decided to pretend that we should have treated them as employees instead of subcontractors, which is blatantly false. But not only did they make that up and start sending these threatening letters, they didn't say who made that up. I never got a letter saying, here's what we've decided. They just started with threats. You owe us thousands of dollars. And so they never said what it was based on. They never said who made the determination. They just started sending demand letters, like good mafia thugs, give us thousands of dollars. And I kept writing back over and over again saying, I don't have employees. I want to have a meeting. If you think that I did something wrong, I want to have a meeting. You don't start by threatening me and trying to steal my stuff based on something that some anonymous person at the IRS made up without explanation, without evidence, and without any chance to respond. So I kept writing, and my letters, I admit, got nastier and nastier because they're acting like criminal fascist thugs, so I started calling them that, because that's what they are. Kerry Martin, that's what you are. You're a crook. You're a liar, you're a thief, you're an extortionist crook. You're a drain on humanity. So I kept writing back and kept saying, I want a meeting. You're making something up, fabricated out of thin air. I don't even know who made it up. I don't know what it was based on, because they just started sending threatening letters, give us this. And I mean zillions of letters, because they would do a separate one for each year, for each dumb little penalty and each piece of interest. And so it was, a barrage of letters, and I kept writing back saying, you made this up. I've never been an employer. I've never had employees. If you disagree, give me a meeting. And they huffed and puffed and huffed and puffed and kept demanding more and more until it was tens of thousands of dollars based on something they just made up. Oh, and at one point they just assigned me an employer ID number and started putting it on the letters. I said, I never asked for that. I've never been an employer. I think their letter even said, here's the number you requested. I didn't request it. They just made it up based on their own fabricated lie. And so I would just get these letters over and over and over again, and they would never respond when I wrote back and said, I want a meeting, you just made this up. It's totally factually incorrect. I don't even know what it's based on. You don't even put names on your letters. It's just these anonymous, please give us $10,000, please give us $20,000, or we'll do nasty things to you. Basically, the mafia, only with a lot less integrity and consistency. So they send these letters, we're going to steal this, we're going to huff and puff, and they file liens. And if I went through all the examples of rules and procedures, their own rules and procedures that they violated, this video would be 3 hours long. They intentionally used a letter that didn't apply and a procedure that didn't apply, so they wouldn't have to give me a collections due process hearing before filing a lien. They skipped examination. Well, let me just tell you what's supposed to happen. And this is what their publications say, and this is what their website says, and this is what they pretend is the case. If they allege that you owe something, if they audit you and say you don't get that deduction or you didn't report this, or whatever they allege that they think was wrong, they're supposed to tell you about it. They're supposed to have one person that handles the case. He's supposed to tell you what it was based on, what they think you owe and why. offer you an examination meeting. You go in, you can explain your position, and say your piece, have your say, show your evidence. They're supposed to show theirs, show their evidence, explain their position. If you still disagree, you can talk to the supervisor. If after that you still disagree, you can take the case to IRS appeals and have an appeals officer who's never dealt with the case before look it over, and you can challenge the IRS's claim. If you don't agree with him, you're supposed to be able to go to his supervisor. There's another thing. If there's a legal question, you can ask for a thing called technical advice. And after that, they're supposed to send you a letter that says, here's the demand, and then you can take it to tax court and say, wait, I think they're still getting it wrong. That's on paper what they do. And what they do to me is don't offer me a meeting and refuse to give me one when I ask for it 20 times in writing. No examinations meeting, no supervisor meeting, no appeals meeting, no tax court, no anything. No chance at any point to say anything about the case. Just huff and puff, give us money, huff and puff, give us money, huff and puff, give us money, or we'll do nasty things. All the way up to filing liens. And now this letter that says you come here, huff and puff. Literally, they are claiming that I owe them more money than my wife and I made combined for all of the years in question, based on them making up that, hey, you treated them as subcontractors instead of employees. They're just trying to rob us of $300 and some thousand. Now, the reason I'm not all that worried is I don't have anything left to steal. They've wiped me out. We're losing our house, so don't have a car. So I'm not all that terrified because you can't steal what doesn't exist. But I think it's important to point out what a bunch of liars and crooks these people are. Now, here's the fun part. So I'm writing a zillion letters saying I want to have a meeting. I want to discuss this because you just made it up. It's blatantly false. I can't even tell who made it up. I'm getting letters from IRS in Cincinnati, in Detroit, in Atlanta, finally in Hatboro, which is around here, Hatboro, Pennsylvania. And most of them don't have names on them. And they're just saying, you owe this $1 million, you better pay up or else we'll do nasty things to you. And I write to them, and then it appears at a different office, and it's just a constant harassment and terrorism and no chance to say anything. So eventually, I filed a complaint with TIGTA, Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, and said, look, there can't be a more obvious example of violation of due process. They made something up. They didn't say who made it up. They didn't say what it was based on. They didn't offer me any sort of meeting, and in fact, when I requested one over and over and over again in writing, they wouldn't give me any meeting at all. They went all the way to collections, which is illegal and against their rules for a dozen different reasons. So far, TIGTA has done nothing. They got the thing, and I got the letter that says we have your case, and they've done nothing. I also wrote to the taxpayer advocate. Now, this is an IRS office that pretends to be, it's just a bizarre concept to begin with. It's like the mafia having an extortion victim advocate office in it. It pretends to be independent, but it's in the IRS. And I wrote to them and said, they skipped everything. Every single one of your rules, every procedure, everything you're supposed to do if there's a disagreement about what somebody owes, they skipped. The taxpayer advocate sent me back a form letter that said, your letter is frivolous. Now, the reason for that is the IRS still does another thing, which is illegal, which is code people as illegal tax protesters. And actually in 1998, Congress passed a law that outlawed that. So you can't just code somebody in a certain way and then deny them all due process. Well, they obviously still do. That's obviously what they're doing. If you know the history of my case, there's the legal issue about the income tax in general. This has nothing to do with that. I never brought that up in this case. This is just they're pretending I should have pretended subcontractors were employees. That's all. So when I write to them and say, wait a minute, they skipped all of the meetings. Here are all their rules and procedures saying they're supposed to give me a meeting. And they say, that's frivolous. We're not going to respond. It's because they have me coded that way. Any idiot who knows their system and how it works can see it's because they still illegally have me coded in such a way that literally means to every IRS employee who looks at that, don't meet with this guy, don't give him any say, never let him say a thing, give him no due process, skip it all, and go to collections as fast as you can. Literally, that they know that that's what the code means. They also know it's illegal, but they do it anyway. So I was scheduled to drive across the country to do a talk in San Diego at Libertopia, which I did. And thanks again to the people on my list who made that possible. I couldn't nearly have afforded it, but a bunch of people chipped in for gas and all sorts of things to make that possible. The day before I'm supposed to leave, we're, like I said, the bank's in the process of swiping our house, and we're moving stuff out of it to somewhere else, and we drive up to pick up some more stuff from our old house, and there are a bunch of fascists milling around with police on them, and you know, they're not quite in riot gear, but they have their flak jackets and looking important. And I'm thinking, what now? It's the IRS. Now get this. It's, first of all, you can't tell it's the IRS till you get up close enough to see it says Treasury Department. They have police in big letters. They're pretending to be police. They're IRS extortionists. There was one local cop, because they have a local cop there to sort of spectate when they go to harass and terrorize somebody. So this is next to my house, and we pull up, and I thought, yeah, I forgot to have a camera with me. Let's leave. We're going to go get a camera, and we're going to come back. But I pull up to the light, and we stop, and they come up to the window, tung, tung, tung. And I roll the window down a little bit, and they say, "You're not under arrest, but you're blah, 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 blah. There's some tax matters you need to discuss." So here are a half dozen. I presume they were armed. I didn't actually notice, but usually the thugs who do this are CID, the Criminal Investigation Division, and they go around armed. So here's half a dozen thugs showing up at my house unannounced, milling around. And I later heard from a neighbor they'd showed up before when we weren't there, milled around and then left, saying, "There's tax matters you need to discuss." This is after years of me saying, "I want to have a meeting, I want to have a meeting," and then saying, I'm not saying anything, not even responding, not saying anything about my request and never giving me a meeting. Kerry Martin was apparently there. That extortionist fascist swine was hiding somewhere. "You have to talk to her." And I said, "No, I don't have to talk to her right now. I'm not going to. When we talk, it's going to be on the record, and it's going to be an examination meeting, not an extortionist crook meeting," which is what they want, and what they scheduled for today, which is why I didn't go. They unilaterally scheduled the meeting for today and said, "You better be there or we'll do nasty things to you." And they knew that I had left on the trip, so when they sent me the letter saying there's going to be a meeting, they knew I wouldn't have time to get back, write it, and give them notice that I'm going to record it. Because under their rules, not that they care about their rules, you're allowed to record their meeting. You have to give them 30 days notice. Well, if the meeting's in 2 weeks, you can't give them 30 days notice. So if you show up, they say, "No, you didn't give us notice, you can't record it." So no, I'm not meeting those fascists off the record. Never will. And so half a dozen fascists show up. "We're going to discuss tax matters. We're big and important." And it wasn't a summons, it wasn't a subpoena, it wasn't in anything, it was just them being fascist. Now the IRS does this a lot, but it's normally to people who get a bunch of letters saying you're being audited, we have to meet, you have to bring records, you have to do this, that, the other thing, and they just don't respond. So eventually fascists will show up at their house or their place of work unannounced and look big and important and say, "You have to have a meeting," and most people go, "Oh, okay, right away." I think the fascists there were a little bit taken aback when I said, "I've been the one asking for a meeting for years, and they won't give me one." And so their huff and puff sort of fizzled out and turned into nothing, and eventually they left. Okay, so let's summarize. At some point, somebody at the IRS, don't know who and don't know what it was based on, made up that I should have treated, this years and years and years ago, I should have treated employees or subcontractors as employees. I should have pretended they were employees and withheld from them. Based on that made-up accusation, which is factually and legally bogus, it's not true in the least, it's not even debatable, but based on somebody making that up, they didn't say, "Now let's have a meeting," or "Now you can have your say." They just skipped all the way to, "Give us tens of thousands of dollars or we'll do nasty things." And then they filed liens against me. And are huffing and puffing, and they were hoping I'd be downtown right now so they could huff and puff some more and threaten to do nasty things to me. Off the record, because I didn't have time to send them notice that I'd be recording it. Why does anybody think these are law enforcers? Why does anybody think the rules matter? Why does anybody think they deserve any civility and respect? They're crooks. They made something up and they tried to steal $300,000 from me. Now, I don't have $300,000. I don't have $300. So good luck stealing what doesn't exist. But look at what they are. They made it up. They skipped all the due process. Basically, in my case, and it's certainly not the only case, the facade of due process and legality and all that fell away, and they're just crooks. Kerry Martin, you're just a crook. You're not a law enforcer. You're not even a tax collector. You're just a crook. What you do is steal people's money. Now, imagine if it was the other way around. Imagine if I decided to show up at Kerry Martin's house with a dozen armed thugs, and she comes driving up and I knock on a window, you have to come talk to us about some tax matters. To tell her, I never had employees. Imagine how much she would freak out, and I'd get arrested, and, I don't do that because, unlike Kerry Martin, I'm not a fascist terrorist thug. I try to talk and say words and say, you made this up. It's factually incorrect. It's legally incorrect. I'm supposed to be able to have a meeting to point this out and to make you point out, because they have the burden of proof of showing that there's some basis for what they made up, which they never did and they couldn't possibly do. Incidentally, there is a collections due process thing pending now, because I did request that. So that's one more way in which this extortion was illegal, because while that's pending, they're not supposed to do extortion and collection stuff. So, one more of 100 laws that she broke. Who cares? But if you look at the way they operate and the way they think, they put on a show of legality and properness and rules, but when it comes right down to it, they don't care. They're just thugs. They'll harass you and terrorize you and threaten you and violate their own laws and rules and regulations and procedures constantly all over the place. If I had had $300,000, she would have stolen it. Kerry Martin would have stolen it based on a bald-faced lie that some anonymous liar made up. I don't know if it was her that made it up. Could have been a liar at Cincinnati, Atlanta, Detroit, around here. I don't know. They don't say. They like most crooks, they hide what they're doing. They're not honest. They don't discuss anything. They just steal stuff. They threaten and huff and puff and steal stuff. And what power do we have? People have gone up to the IRS, realize reason, law, truth, who cares? They have no impact on the crooks who work at the IRS. Kerry Martin doesn't care that it was based on a bald-faced lie. She knows that. She doesn't care that she broke the law all over the place. She knows that. And Tigta knows that too. They don't care either. Taxpayer advocate, they don't care. None of the IRS offices care. Oh, we better run to Congress. They don't care. These are Congress's attack dogs. And every once in a while, Congress puts on a show of, oh, we're a little bit upset with how the IRS is abusing people. Give me a break. It's like a guy holding a chain with a Rottweiler chawing down on your ankle saying, I'm very upset that he's doing that. Give me a break. He's doing that because the IRS attack dogs are doing it because their owners want them to. Their owners being Congress. The courts don't care. Nobody cares. It's a giant extortion racket with a facade of legality and properness and formal due process and all that. It's a joke. They put on a show to give the appearance that there's due process. But whether you're talking about the IRS or cops on the street or any other bureaucracy, they do it because they have the power. Because they can hurt you if you disobey. The show they put on top of that is a joke. It's not real. The due process, the law, the rules, it's not real. Kerry Martin is trying to steal $300,000 from me based on an absolute fabricated lie, and she knows it. And she knows that nobody in the system is going to lift a finger to stop her because they all live off of that extortion racket. There is no consequence to Kerry Martin or anybody else acting like a crook and a thug, breaking the law and lying about the facts and then lying about the rules and doing everything wrong, being illegal, immoral, unethical, everything else. There's no disincentive against that. There's no reason for her to not. She gets rewarded and praised and promoted for being a thug and a crook. And nothing happens to her when she breaks the law, as my case just demonstrated. Taxpayer advocate, they don't care. Treasury Inspector General, they haven't done a thing. All the different IRS offices that know about it, they don't care. They help. They help with the extortion and the lying and the breaking the law and all that. the whole system helps. So there's no incentive for Kerry Martin to do the right thing. And what power do we have? The victims of this extortion. What power do we have? They can huff and puff and threaten. They can show up at your house and unannounced with a bunch of fascists to say, they can wipe out your bank account, they can steal your house. But what do we have? Well, what I have is the ability to say stuff in public. And maybe a little public exposure, maybe a little public humiliation. Every once in a while we'll get somebody inside the system to decide to start acting like a human being. Kerry Martin, you don't have to be an extortionist thief for the biggest crooks in the world, the politicians that call themselves the United States government. You don't have to do that. And if it makes you feel powerful to rob people and threaten people and huff and puff and steal their stuff, you're not powerful. You're just their little slave stealing for them. If you want to actually be powerful, if you want to actually be a moral human being, quit. Stop being a thief. If I had your mentality, I'd show up at your house and threaten you and steal your car and steal your house and wipe out your bank account and rob you at gunpoint. I don't have that mentality. Here's the weird thing, Kerry Martin. I want you to be free. I don't want you to be a thief, and I don't want you to be a victim of a thief. I want you to be a free, moral human being. And you can't be that while you work at the IRS. Right now, you're just a liar and a crook and a criminal. You don't have to be. You could quit. Now, I think people who are likely to quit aren't likely to work at the IRS. There have been a couple of exceptions. Sherry Peel Jackson and Joseph Bannister, two very obvious ones, of people who had consciences and said, wow, I'm not going to do this anymore because it just occurred to me, I'm not the good guy. Kerry Martin, you're not the good guy. And frankly, I don't know how you can imagine that you are. You know, if it was actually, if you weren't lying about the facts and lying about the law and breaking the law and violating procedure, I could sort of see you imagining that, well, I'm collecting taxes and this blah, yada, yada. But you know you're lying. You know you're breaking the law. You know you're a crook. Can you actually tell yourself that you're the good guy? Threatening and huffing and puffing and terrorizing and harassing and stealing? You think you're the good guy? Give me a freaking break. You're a crook. That's all you are. You're a crook. Kerry Martin, you're a crook. Stop being a crook. You don't have to be a crook. Nobody's making you be a crook. Oh, well, it's my career. Well, good excuse. You know, that's what the Nazis said too. Oh, that's what we were told. We were just doing our jobs. Not a real good excuse. Anybody out there, IRS, bureaucrat, anybody out there working for the government in a job where you force the will of the politicians on the people. You take their stuff or you boss them around, tell them what they can and can't do. You raid picnics. You shut down lemonade stands. You swipe people's property. Whatever. All you bureaucrats out there who are acting as unthinking thugs for the politicians, you don't have to do that. You could be moral, rational human beings. Kerry Martin, you could choose to be a moral, rational human being. But you cannot be that as long as you work for the IRS. You can steal all my stuff, you can wipe out my bank accounts, you can steal my house, which most of which you already have. If I'm living in a cardboard box, I'm still going to tell the truth. In fact, because we have written books and the internet and things like that, even when I'm dead, I'm still going to be telling the truth, because my words will still be around. And that's all I can do. And all the people who are now acting as unthinking thugs, the bureaucrats, the tax collectors, the cops, unthinking thugs imposing the will of the politicians upon innocent people, you have to decide for yourself how long you're going to be an agent of evil.